work we do is extremely important. You've heard me say that many, many times before. The work we do is invaluable. But the work we do is hard. It's difficult work. It's work that hits you emotionally. There can be no doubt about that. We deal with people who are victims of all kinds of trauma. And we've learned over the years that trauma is pervasive, and that trauma has the ability, if you will, to become other people's trauma. It's called different names. Secondary trauma is one term that I've heard used in the past. But it captures the notion that when you are working in a field where trauma is prevalent, that it can and in fact does have an impact on those who are involved in that work. So we share that unfortunate trauma with the victims that we serve. But it's important that we acknowledge it, it's important that we understand it, and it's important that we act upon it. And one of the ways that we act upon it is by becoming more educated about that, so that we can recognize it and we learn techniques that we can incorporate into our practices, into our policies, and in the very way that we care for one another here in the workplace and as we care for ourselves individually in our lives. So I want to thank Mika and her staff and everyone who's been involved in organizing this. A very special welcome and thank you to our expert speakers who are here today and those who will join us tomorrow. So please take note of the dialogue today, think about it tonight, come back again tomorrow, and I hope at the end of these two sessions that you will feel somewhat refreshed, educated, and again, know that all of you are deeply appreciated, not only by me, but by all those that we serve. So thank you for everything that you do, and I certainly hope that you find this valuable. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Julie, for providing this opportunity for the staff. We do have a two-day event. So for our day one event, we have intimate partner violence to kick us off, understanding of what is intimate partner violence, the cycle of violence, the types of violence. Then the second half of today, we'll be talking about trauma and intro to trauma. Then tomorrow, we'll go more into trauma, the psychobiology of trauma, and then really spend the second half of tomorrow morning session looking at trauma-informed services. What are the principles of trauma-informed services, and what does that mean to us at CalVCP? To get us started today, I want to introduce to you Michelle Coleman. Michelle is the executive director of Stand Up Placer. She's been there since 2009, and Stand Up Placer has been providing services in Placer County for 36 years. They provide services to domestic violence victims and their children. They also provide services to sexual assault victims and their significant others. Michelle has a master's degree in nonprofit management, and she's been in the nonprofit industry for over 20 years, working in a wide range of services, anywhere from grassroots to large-scale services such as the Goodwill. Michelle has had an amazing amount of experience on boards throughout California, including the Partnership to End Domestic Violence. And fun fact, Michelle does live in Roseville. She enjoys hiking and has a wonderful new dog named Coco. So Michelle, please come on up.
This being October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that's something that is good for us because it's an opportunity to take every opportunity to talk to people about domestic violence in the community. But it also feels a little bit like we're diminishing this problem because it happens 12 months a year. It doesn't just happen 1 month. And because of some of our friends, let's see, Roger Goodell, Ray Rice, Ray McDonald, and Mark Fuller, we've had domestic violence awareness for a couple of months now. So for some reason, I guess we should thank them a little bit for that. As Mika said, I have the privilege of serving as an executive director for Stand Up Placer, which is an agency that serve survivors. We call them survivors because at our agency, if they're still alive, they have survived. And so we serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking there, and their significant others. And what I'm doing today is a little bit of domestic violence 101. So I don't know, how many of you feel I know everything there is to know about domestic violence, so we can all go? Okay? No? Okay. So they did say we're the experts, but I won't say I'm the expert, because the one thing I will say that we say in every staff meeting, we never stop learning how to do this. And every time you learn something new, you're responsible for implementing that when we're serving our survivors. So not an expert, but just someone who has an interest and a passion in serving the survivors that we have the best way we possibly can. I just want to start out with a little quote. Excuse me, the cheaters. When you're over 25, this happens. So, without warning, he struck me with his right fist. He hit me as hard as if he were in a boxing ring, except he wasn't wearing boxing gloves and he wasn't in a boxing ring. And that's a quote from Carole King. From those of you who know her, that's just to show you domestic violence crosses all spectrums. So if we want to put it in a box and say football players or athletes do that, you can't do that. If you want to say only poor people or uneducated people do that, you can't do that. One of the people I mentioned today was Mark Fuller, who happens to be a U.S. district judge, who also, during the same time all of this football stuff was happening, was arrested for beating his wife up in the Ritz-Carlton. So obviously money has nothing to do with it either. Violence is violence, and violence is unacceptable. So basically, first of all, what am I talking about when I say domestic violence? So it's a pattern of abusive behavior in a relationship where one partner uses it to gain power and control over their intimate partner. I will say that to you a number of times. It's about power and control. So if you say, well, what about the filter I want you to use? Well, was this situation about power and control? And that sometimes you can answer the question yourself. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the forms of violence. So I'm not going to click, so I'm going to let you click. Because I'm not supposed to look behind me. So, okay. So basically physical, of course. When we talk about domestic violence, everybody thinks of, right now, Ray Rice and that punch in the elevator. Yes, that is what it can look like. And trust me, it's not just happening in elevators. It's happening at your next door neighbors. It's happening with coworkers and friends, people in your congregation. It's happening physically, and as brutal as that punch was, it is happening in this community. But it also means it could also be just restraining the individual, not letting them move or get away, keeping them from making a phone call, keeping them from leaving the room, keeping them from doing something to take care of themselves. It could mean grabbing an arm. It could mean blocking. Physical violence is the easiest one for all of us to identify. It causes injury or pain on the individual. So sexual violence. A lot of people are saying, well, isn't that sexual assault? But one of the things we find a lot of times with the individuals who come and stay in our shelter, and we have a 40-bed shelter in Placer County, a lot of the times the individuals who come to our shelter, through the process of talking with the therapist and talking about the issues going on for them, will in an offhanded manner mention that they are pushed to have sex, they were raped, they were forced to look at pornographic materials, or even to have sex with others. But if this is what you've learned in your relationship, it doesn't seem wrong to you. It doesn't seem off. But it is sexual violence. Any sort of unwanted manipulation sexually. And again, I would say to you, well, what if you just don't feel like it? What if it's look through the lens of power and control when you look at any question of what is this domestic violence or not? I want to share with you a little story about, I will say Susie, one of those, not her real name. This individual actually came to us because someone had given her a brochure about our organization. And she didn't have any bruises, but she wouldn't even look up and talk to us. There was such fear. And so, of course, the case manager was trying to unpack what's going on for her. And she asked her, well, does he grab you? Does he push you? Does he knock you down? And she really was, well, not much, just a little bit. And then when the case manager sort of broaching the sexual issue is harder than broaching the others. When she began to talk about sexual practices, we found out that there were things that he was doing to her that she thought was appropriate because when she got married, she was a virgin. She had never had sex. And he's telling her, this is what sex looks like. Not just something like anal sex or things that consenting adults do, but he actually had an animal in the room. And you're thinking, and really you didn't know, but you're 18 years old when you get married. You've never experienced sex. You come from a family where sex was never talked about. So what does it look like? So finally, when she started to realize she could make decisions about her sexual practices and that she gets to decide if this is power and control or not, she was able to begin to make the journey toward making decisions for herself. Sexual manipulation can be as painful as physical manipulation, and oftentimes harder to get to, because our culture is really very good at keeping us from talking too much about sexual instances. Emotional or verbal. One of the things that's very interesting, we have a 24-hour crisis line, and the question we get more than anything when they first call is, well, this is going on, but is that domestic violence? He just insults me all the time. He just makes me feel like I'm nothing. He just diminishes me. Is that domestic violence? Absolutely, that's domestic violence. And an individual, it's all about power and control. If they can get you to think that you are not capable of living your life the way you want to, of making decisions, of taking care of your children. You're not capable of holding a job. You're not capable of making a living. You're not capable of taking care of the finances. You're not capable. That's sort of emotional, and I'm sorry, I mixed it up a little bit. It's more about humiliation and harassment as well. I don't know if you've ever, I have another survivor who her new husband kept calling her fat ass. And he was like, oh, no, this is a loving term. I wouldn't call anybody else that. It's because I love you. It's our special name. It's our special pet name. And at first she thought, oh, well, as long as he doesn't call me that in public. But how long do you think it took before he started to call her that in public? That, and then it escalated to other things. See, the emotional and the verbal is just as painful for our survivors as the physical. It isolates them, it puts them in a place where they don't feel comfortable moving forward in their life. And I said a word, isolate, and I should have mentioned that as one of the early issues as well. One of the things that we find with most, I will never say all, because there is no such thing as all happening at any of the survivors that we serve, but most of the time there is some isolation. They can't make you feel inadequate or humiliate you if you have people to go to support you. You have to be isolated and believe that there's no one else that believes you are good enough. Isolation allows that power and control to grow and fester. Emotional and verbal, other things, saying things awfully about the individual in front of their children. What is worse than your children thinking badly about you? Thinking that you're not capable, thinking that you can't take care of them, much less take care of them yourself. Emotional or verbal abuse is violence. So let's talk about economic control. How can that be violent? I don't know if you've ever had a friend or colleague who never goes to lunch with you, never meets after work, only has $5 to get through the day. It's about power and control. The individuals who don't have any idea what it takes to run a household, has no access to the money, no access to the budget, no access to the bills. What does it take? No access to their own paychecks. Bringing that paycheck home or having it deposited directly into the account, and the only one who has access to the account is the individual who is controlling the situation. I don't want to say he or she, because the one thing that's very clear is abuse, and perpetrators can be male or female. I just wanted to say, because I didn't say that in the beginning, I want to be clear about that. It's not a he or she, male or female. One of the things that was interesting for me is we had an individual that you would just never expect to be in our safe house. We had an individual who actually had 2 master's degrees. During the day, she actually oversaw a department in a large company where there were 22 people reporting to her. And you say, well, why would she be in a safe house? She was in a safe house because her check was always going into the bank account. But once she began to think about getting away, thinking about, I want to make a different decision, he found out about that and froze all of the assets. So she had no money to even go to a hotel or any credit cards. And then looking back on that, she talked about the fact that the home, the cars, all of the property were in his name alone. And he gave her very good reasons. He's the financial guy. He gave her very good reasons on why that happened. But it gave him more power and control over her. She's one of those success stories because once she had a little time in a safe house to debrief and make a plan and stop her checks from going into their joint check account, she was able to make another decision and move forward. But maintaining control of all the economic decisions for your family is another form of violence. In addition to that, messing up the credit. You know, if I get we have credit together and I waste a lot of money and I don't pay the bills because you don't even know if the bill should be paid. And then you want to go on and make another step in your life. Then you all of a sudden you look at your credit score and your credit score is zip. So where does that leave you? Well, you have to stay with me until you can get your credit score up. Or, you know, well, I'm the one in charge of the money. So if you do this, then I'll give you the money or the support to do that. If you do this, then that. And unless they get out and take a lead for themselves, make a decision about their own life, that's not going to change. In addition, I don't know if you've ever experienced a friend who just could not keep a job. Anybody who has people reporting to them, just think about a time where you've had a otherwise good employee that was constantly getting phone calls every few minutes. And when I first learned about this, I thought about back before I knew about what domestic violence could look like. And I remember a staff member who was always getting calls, and I was just getting angry at her. I was just thinking, so, what is she, like, wasting time? The productivity is low. She's not doing what she's supposed to do. But ultimately, when she ended up in the hospital, we found out that what was happening is he was calling her to check, who are you talking to? Where did you go for lunch? And how many people lose their jobs because of this sort of interference from outside the company, or even inside the company if you both work there? How many people get a reputation for not being a good worker because of the interference of an other individual in their lives? If you can't take care of yourself, how can you build your own life? I have another situation where I can control you because you can't keep a job. Who's going to feed our kids? Who is going to pay the house payment? You can't keep a job. Where are you going? You have to stay here. It's power and control. Psychological. It's more about causing the fear. The fear of things are going to happen. Now, the physical, when you have physical going on, of course you're afraid. You know what it looks like when someone's going to ball their fist up and knock you out. You know what it feels like when they're putting their hands around your neck and strangling you. Strangling, not choking. It's a difference. Strangling you. Choking is you're coughing it up. Anyway. So there's that fear that comes with physical. But psychologically, I'm going to kill myself if you do this. I'm going to kill you if you do this. I'm going to hurt your family. I'm going to kill your dog. Someone told me they were going to kill Coco. There'd be some power and control. Coco's my baby. The psychological is another one where people are concerned about saying or naming it violence, naming it part of domestic violence. They want to think that I should be able to. I mean, she's just saying bad things about me. I know she's not really going to hurt, but there's the fear that's there. And even the actual destruction, if you talk with people from the SPCA, they will tell you that a number of animals that are murdered are in domestic violence relationships, because that's where they feel like, if I hurt this animal, it's going to put real fear into you. Because if I'm going to kill the dog, why wouldn't I kill you? So the psychological is equally as damaging to the individual who is experiencing it. And I have spiritual there, and I don't know if it's showing up. I actually had it in italics, because a lot of people connect it directly with the psychological. But the spiritual relates to how an individual will use your faith tradition against you. It also, and for those of us, we also know that there are those who will use the spiritual text, take it out of context, put whatever kind of meaning that they want to have behind it, and convince you meaning the survivor, that this is what your higher power wants to happen. That's the way life is supposed to look. So the spiritual violence also, for those where the faith tradition is very important to them, can be very powerful in impacting the power and control over their lives. So when we talk about the violence, we talked about some of the types of violence, and as I said, this is more DV 101, and hopefully at the end, if there are questions or if there are others you've heard about you want to talk about, we definitely will talk more about the different types. But then I want to talk a little bit about the cycle of violence. And I would be surprised if all of us haven't heard the cycle of violence somewhere. And it always looks like a circle. I mean, you've probably seen the power and control wheel, and everybody and their brother has created another wheel, and it's always very circular. You know, it starts with the tension building stage. So what is that? It really means that when life is supposedly okay, but the survivor knows things aren't 100% okay. So there's a little bit of walking on eggshells, and are you okay? Do you like this? Is this good? Kids, make sure you do this right and that right, as if there was anything they could do that would prevent the incidents. But we know that there is a time when it's just sort of business as usual, being very careful where before there is, for some reason, for anything there, you breathed the wrong way. I don't like your clothes. I don't like the way you left the car. You didn't clean, or it's a day that ends in Y. Whatever it is, there's the explosion, the abusive incident. And that takes a lot of different, as we talked about the different forms of violence, it takes a lot of different forms. It's not always, he punched me. It's, he diminished me to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. It's, he wouldn't allow me to even go to my family's for our traditional Seder meal. He came to my job and just yelled and screamed at me in front of my boss and all of my colleagues and coworkers. And the next thing you know, my boss is calling me in and I'm written up. Whatever that incident is, big, hairy, and ugly, it's not just it's okay. It's something that impacts the entire family. And then there's I don't call it the honeymoon. We say honeymoon phase, you'll hear that a lot, but it's the normalizing phase. Sometimes it's just, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. You know, I did that because I love you so much. No one else could make me be that angry. No one else could make me do that because I love you so much. You're so important to me. And it also could be, okay, now, you know what'll happen. I'm in charge, and from now on, you stop doing that, and I won't hit you again. You stop doing that, and I'll give you enough money to live through the week. You stop doing that, whatever I don't want you to do, and things will get better. So you go through that phase where things are better, and it feels like, okay, he is sorry. I just said he. They are sorry and want to change the situation. Then we go into that tension phasing again. So things are normal, and we're doing things normally, but I'm being careful. I'm being careful. One of the reasons I brought up the fact that it's very circular, and you'll see all these circles, and it looks very, okay, this, then this, then this. It's like a if-then chart. But the bottom line is, it may start out in a circle, but it doesn't stay the same size. What we've experienced, what we see with the survivors we serve, is all of a sudden, the honeymoon phase gets shorter. The tension building phase gets shorter. The explosions become closer and closer together. And it looks more and more like, let me show the next slide for me. It looks more and more like a tornado than a circle. And everything around it is destructive. The family is destroyed. The individual's self-esteem, the individual's abilities to move forward are impacted. And it gets to be more and more. One of the things that happens when individuals finally make the decision to leave is they get a sense of it's getting shorter and shorter, and the next time, I'm not sure there'll be any time in between. And the next time, I'm not sure that strangulation doesn't become my murder. The next time, I'm not sure that threat to hurt my child might not really happen in a short order. So when you're thinking about the cycle of violence, when you're thinking about the way that things happen in a family, please don't think that, oh, it's going to be this nice linear circle for a very long time. It will change. It will become something that's explosive much quicker, much sooner. So when we talk about all of that, and one of the questions, I think we heard a lot of this when we were listening to all the media around the NFL and all that is, so why do they stay? Why do they go back? You know, I would propose that's the wrong question, but we'll talk about that at the end. So one of the reasons that they stay, there's an emotional attachment. There's this feeling, this is my partner, but I love them, and they love me. And truth be told, if this is the way love looked in your family of origin, this is the way you think love looks. The in and out, the battling, the diminishing. The belief that if I just love them enough, things will change. I'm the only one that can love this person enough to help them be the person they want to be. Or I am the one that's wrong anyway. So together I can make him right. And of course the threat of death is one of the reasons they don't leave. And we know that when a person is preparing to leave is when they're most likely to be killed. That and when they're pregnant. Because when a pregnant woman, what's the focus? It's on the child. So the abuser in this situation is losing control. When we talk about isolation, we're not just talking about isolation in the house. We're talking about isolation from family. We're talking about isolation from friends, coworkers, family. You can't go to the family reunion. They don't like me. It's just you and me against the world, babe. We don't need anybody else. Oh, they don't really know you like I know you. They don't know you like I know. They don't care about you like I care about you. And your friends are just gossipy gusses. They don't really know. They don't know what we got. What we got is special. And at work, of course, you don't tell your home business at work. What happens at home stays at home. It stays at home. And building that in diminishes the ability for them to have the support they need to leave. If there's nowhere you feel safe to go to get help, you're going to stay where you are. And you have somebody in that household telling you, nobody else cares about you. This is where you need to stay. I'm the only one that cares. The feeling of being hopeless. I'm going to tell you a quick story about a young lady that came to our safe house. Boy, our safe house is busy. Unfortunately, it is really busy. And she talked about the fact that, because one of the things we do before we bring anyone into the safe house is really sort of problem solve with them and say, where might you go where your life can be least disruptive? What about a friend? What about a family member? What about, a friendly colleague? And when we talked about her family, this young lady just broke down in tears because she actually told her mother off at his insistence and felt like I had put myself in this hole. There's now nowhere to go. She called her mother names that were less than complimentary and really told her, I don't need you, I don't want you, get out of my life. So she just knew that she had nowhere to go. But working with her case manager, she decided to try to make the call to her mother. And though her mother was very angry, because she had left many times and she hadn't done what she wanted her to do, but her mother said, if you're ready to go, come home. So isolation is something that can be impacted with advocacy and someone supporting the survivors. So just wanted to share that, because I feel like I'm saying all these things that are like, oh my God, what's ever going to happen? How is anybody ever going to get in and make any different decisions? But it does happen. There's a lot of people making decisions to take care of their lives. That hopeless, helpless, trapped feeling is something that keeps a lot of people in their relationships. I don't know if you've been paying attention to those tweets, the hashtag why I stay or hashtag why I left. And I watched the one with Meredith Vieira. Now here's an educated woman on television talking about important topics, and she indicated that she felt like I had to stay with him. I'm the one that got into this. I'm the one, so I can't go anywhere. She stayed in that relationship because she felt like she had to. She felt trapped, and she felt she had trapped herself until situations changed and she was able to move to another city. But I encourage you, if you have any questions about what that feels like, what that looks like, to definitely go to that hashtag why I stay and hashtag why I left. I'm not a tweeter, so don't. I go to Google and Google them, so don't let that deter you, because it's some interesting information. It really gives you insight into why it happens. And one of the things, of course, we think about the economic dependence on an abuser. If you cannot support your family on your salary, then you're going to think twice about trying to make a different decision about staying with them. And you're thinking, one of the things that happens a lot with survivors that we see is that they also think my children should have a parent. I'm taking something away from my child by leaving that parent. And they're also fear of losing custody. If the other partner is the one who's making the money and has a nice professional job and is well thought of in the community, but every night you're being knocked down or diminished or psychologically battered, who's going to believe you? And if he tells everyone that you're crazy, she tells everyone that you're crazy, who are they going to believe? This pillar of the community or the stay-at-home parent? This captain of industry, female captain is female or male, okay. This captain of industry, or this person that does a job every day. That's a major fear with a lot of the survivors. It's all about making sure that their children's lives aren't hurt by making a different decision. A belief that no one will believe them. And unfortunately, in the business we are in, we know that there are times where there are law enforcement that don't believe. There are law enforcement who we have yet to educate adequately, who still aren't part of the solution. Individuals who have not seen it actually happen might not believe. Individuals who believe certain things because of the way they were raised won't believe it. And so that's a valid fear that a number of survivors have that make them stay longer than they had wanted to. And also the cultural or religious constraints, be it a culture that is against divorce, or a culture that marriage is for life, or culture is that a male is the head of the household, a female doesn't leave, a culture where battering is part of what we do in our culture. And there are still some where that is the case. It's very difficult to make a different decision when everyone in your life believes that you're wrong. When everyone in your life believes that if you're being hurt, it must have been something you did. It must have been something that you should change. So I would say, finally, why victims stay or why they go back? I would say that's the wrong question. I would say, what are the barriers to their leaving, and how can we help to alleviate some? That's the question we need to be asking.